Good morning, everybody. Morning, councillors, executive staff. Morning, Samantha, team, whoever else is here. Raj. I think we're all here. Hope everybody had a good night last night, good night's sleep. And we are back for day 2 of deliberations. And we thought we would, as the agenda item has it, just start with 10.3, which is pretty obvious, and then move to Councillor Morris's additional points under 10.3 at the end of the 10.3 that you see in your green sheets, if that makes sense. Excuse me?
Page number?
106 to 167, starting with, this is 10.3a, 111 to 118.
Thank you.
This is a discussion on user fees and charges. And if I could just alert you to 10.3b1, second bullet point is the same as the draft AP, option 2, in other words. Thank you. Yes, please.
Through the Chair, just for elected members, just to clarify, following the decision yesterday, just wanted to bring attention around the parking changes that were outlined in the original draft, which is continued through for the revised draft, just for awareness and confirmation in terms of those increases are still applicable going forward. So it was really just to bring that to your attention. So there are some, for example, that was an $8 to a $10 a day on-street parking charge. So they were a reasonable increase that was proposed through those charges.
Just in light of the decision that you made yesterday about free and your view of the CPD, just bring that to your attention so that you link the two decisions.
And question, if I may, so which item, where will we deal with those? Is that the first one, or?
Sorry, Paul, I didn't quite gather. We just jumped in there. I didn't quite gather what. Could you repeat that?
Sure. So just to bring your attention that the fee increases that were proposed for parking were proposed in our original draft. Decision was made to continue that through the revised draft, but there are some significant increases that were proposed, and we just wanted to bring that to your attention in light of yesterday's decision. So, for example, the daily fee would move from $8 to $10 a day on parking. So it's really just to bring that to your attention, and we would look at in resolution A would be the time to actually just, if there wanted to be any further discussion and confirmation around whether that fee increase would proceed as per the draft.
Thank you.
So could we then just have the page number for those fees and charges so we can see them, please? It may be in a previous.
It's in the actual draft document. It won't be in there. It'll be referred to onto the website. So I'll just have to.
We'll send you an email link.
Yep.
Information.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on page 111. Through to 118, but as you can see, 111 begins with animal control and, excuse me, moves through other issues.
For information for these ones, when we respond to the submitters, we'll give them, we'll send them the link to the staff response. So where we've got staff comments, that would be information that would be provided to the submitter. So in here, we're seeking elected member feedback on, are you comfortable, if you see any of those comments which you think are incomplete or you'd like them changed or some other information added in, let us know that. And then sometimes there's a note to say that we're actually seeking a specific decision by the elected members. So you'll see, like when you get to page 113, there's a statement that says decision required. So we just suggest that you work through page by page maybe. Let us know if there's any other matters you want us to put in the staff comments, and then make a call when you get to the decisions required. They've been done this way because they're more minor than the more substantive ones that you addressed yesterday.
Thank you, Christine. Look, just for clarity, Council, obviously A is just noting the myriad of submissions from pages 111 to 118, but specifically on page 107 and 8 is the resolution around BVL, excuse me, and option 2 is that which is in the draft AP, which is to retain the status quo. Is there any discussion, any queries on that? It's the Bulldog.
So if we passed A now, we are dealing with all the user fees though, or are we just dealing with BBL ones that were then, their increases were suspended as part of their revised due to COVID? Can we just clarify that? BBL announced that they were only doing CPIs, basically, in light of COVID. Correct?
Were some changes made around, I can't remember the word they
There's
used,
a couple
but,
there.
but rebalancing effectively
Yeah.
were the additional changes that were made within that.
Resolution B.
So, as I understand it, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, it's maintaining the status quo on the pre-COVID, the pre-COVID user fees and charges. Is that correct?
Except for CPI movement,
Except for
and that rebalancing that they were doing across some fees.
Okay.
That was just to bring them in line. From my understanding, was to bring them in line with their a consistent application across all of their facilities.
You go to page 119 of your agenda, there's the list of all the fees and charges there, which was what was proposed originally before COVID on the right-hand 3 columns, and then what is now proposed. So you can see the post-COVID, and then if you pass the resolution to approve this, these would be the fees that would come into force.
Councillor Robson.
Good morning, Your Worship. Thank you. This question through you to staff. One of the concerns about user fees and charges, obviously, is they disproportionately affect those with less income, particularly those whose household income is supported by transfer payments from the state. Can we get confirmation around whether certain transfer payments are likely to be CPI adjusted in the next year?
So all user fees will be reviewed as part of the long-term plan.
Sorry, it's the broader question. The question is, I understand what BBL want to do to raise fees by CPI. One of the concerns, of course, is that disproportionately affects people whose household incomes are supported by transfer payments from the state. I'm just trying to ask whether staff are aware whether those transfer payments will be themselves CPI adjusted, and therefore there's no real difference in impact on households that rely on transfer payments, or if in fact the state is cutting back in some of these places and we need to be cognizant of it. So it's to put the CPI rise in context.
Yeah. So, sorry, through the chair, no, wouldn't be able to answer the question in terms of any sort of government transfer payment changes.
Yeah, perhaps there has been some adjustment to welfare payments as a result of COVID. I mean, we could get that detail that might assist your decision making, but I am aware that there have been some changes as a result of COVID. But in terms of CPI adjustment, I don't know what government's intentions is.
Councillors, is anybody prepared to move option 2? Councillor Robson, thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Clout, thank you very much. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Robson?
Yeah, assuming I'm up with the play and it's first motion of the morning. But I appreciate that BVL's gone back and done a revision. I think it was important to do that. I think that a CPI adjustment is not unreasonable. That means in real terms, no increase. Of course, for those people whose incomes have been affected sort of by job loss and whatever, I don't believe that these fees would make a material difference, and I trust that central government will be doing what it's supposed to do to support those people. I think this is just a prudent move by our one significant CCO, and I don't want to go and nickel and dime in that space.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clout.
Thank you. Just clarifying, we are looking at A and B1, option 2. Just double check that's what we're talking about right now. So we're not talking about C or D at this point, is that correct? Just checking.
We are talking about option 2, retaining the status quo as we have currently in the draft AP.
Yep, so that's A and B1, option 2. Okay, and we'll talk about C and D later. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Just double check. Look, I totally concur. I think we've been through quite an extensive exercise, and you know nobody likes to see user fees and charges increase. However, we can't keep relying on the ratepayer to fund the shortfall if there is one. So, quite happy that we are increasing these fees and charges on that basis.
Councillor Cloud. Councillors, other comments? Councillor Arbery.
We just hold one moment, just check that the option that you're selecting is actually what you want. So you've just moved option 2 or 1?
Option 2.
So that is the original higher fees that were in the draft annual plan? No?
Yeah.
So
Just
that
for clarity, I was, with the words here, retain the status quo, I thought...
So then you want option 1, which is amend the BVL fees and charges as proposed in attachment 2 of the council report. Yes. Yes, sorry, just checking with the right resolution.
Right, it is indeed. Okay, so...
Sorry, knowing that specifically, just wanting to make sure that BVL will be, the communications with them will be appropriate, and because they may then come back to us seeking an increase in our annual grant, just to double check.
It will make a note of that. Actually, it was BVL that made the adjustments, so yeah.
And from my understanding, they were going to debt fund the difference, not ask you to make it up. So they were going to debt fund within their own accounts the lost revenue and make that up over time.
All right, so for clarity, Councillor Arbery, just 1 second. We have a mover and a seconder for option 1, not 2, which is to amend the BVL user fees. Thank you. Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, the CPI adjustment seems reasonable to me, and there will be some big changes. So, noting the Mount Sports Centre, there will be increases of up to 28%, but then in other areas like the Aquinas Sports Centre, there will be decreases of up to 25%. And if you look at the charges, that's just so that an adult standard fee at Aquinas is $25, and it's the same at Mount Action Centre. So it's just making sure that the fees are consistent across the network, rather than big increases and big decreases elsewhere. But otherwise, just a CPI adjustment, which makes sense.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I think BVL have done a good job to make adjustments, but still do some things that are prudent and make sense. I note in one submitter on page 113, in regard to Mount Intermediate and so on, when you're working from such a low base of a fee, and you increase it by, what might be 50 cents, 75 cents, but in a percentage, it turns into 28%, 30%. And that's the sort of things we were hearing during the submissions, that their fees were going up I think one person said even up to about 40 or something, but you've got to look at the detail behind it. And I think they've done a good job in adjusting and reducing CPI, obviously, but the other things between different venues, which for some time have been not equitable across the whole network. So happy to support it.
Very good. Council, if there's no more discussion on this, I'll put this to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. The next section is noting comments and submissions in attachment 3, pages 122 to 167. Thank you, Councillor Robson. Can I have a seconder, please?
And if we might just have a few minutes to go through the pages, because I think I had some comments I wanted to just check on if we could.
Thank you. Do you want to go through page by page, or do you have key points you've highlighted? To maintain momentum, if we go through this in, say, 5-page blocks, we will be able to get the bulk of it understood collectively, starting with pages 122 to, say, 127 in the first instance. And Councillor Bullock, you may have highlights in there, of course, and please feel free to bring those out.
Just a question through you, Your Worship. So none of these issues in this particular table have financial impact, is that correct? Just to double check.
So that has been the staff assessment that they're more questions of process information, or where we consider that there isn't a need for a council decision on resourcing. You may have a different view, so and you also may have areas where you think the way that we've communicated or that we've got gaps. So we're sort of seeking feedback on that. If there is none, then this will affect what will go to the submitter in response to the issues they've raised.
So it's more than 5 pages, but I am ready to make some questions and comments on 149.
Just stick to 127 for now. Otherwise, we're going to get bogged down, I think, and then we'll do them and do the next one when we get to that bracket, Larry, if that's okay.
Well, that's the same bracket.
From 122 to 127, is there any queries before we? So we're talking about things like animal control, the civic centre rebuild, infrastructure, planning, forest and bird, accessible properties. Nothing in there. Can we move 128 to 133?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. The problem with feral cats. Oh, here it is. Page 122, Tina.
Question 812. Thanks, Rob. And Heidi, what do you want to raise there?
Tina does. She's just got to find it.
Pardon. Thank you, Tina.
I was just wondering, based on one of the submitters that came in talking about the huge numbers of feral cats that we have, and we don't, as a city, have any plans with cats. We deal with dogs, but not with cats. And so my wondering is if we could explore the possibility of a small grant to an organisation that does work with feral cats, and somehow we could support them, because I think they'd get more bang for their buck than we would if we tried to do something. But I just wondered if that was something we could explore going forward, because the submitter mentioned, you know, that we have traps available, but they're not sure if they're trapping someone's pet. So it would be good to fund an organisation who already are very passionate about this area, already doing it, but with very little resource.
Okay. Thanks very much, Tina. Chief Executive was just suggesting, Calvin, you do this through PSOC and just find what they could, what the possibility of that is.
Yeah, I'd support getting some information back from stuff. It was, what was it called, Kitty? Wild Whiskers, yeah. They really do pick up these cats and rehome them and stuff, do a good job, so.
All right, thank you very much. So moving now to page 128, well, the block of 128 to 133.
There is one matter on page 133 that, which was minor, that we've suggested needs a decision, and Gareth wants to speak to that one.
Thanks, Gareth.
So just in regards to the St Peter's Community Lunch, we funded that through the Kaina Tupu funding that you guys supported yesterday. So this one can come out, or choose option 2 where we don't add any additional funding to that as it's already supported.
Decision's required now, is it? Yeah.
So we would suggest you do option 2, do not add further funding as already included within the Kainga Tupu funding.
Thanks, thank you, Christine. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Hollis, seconded by Councillor Robson. I think had his hand up first. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to those at all?
Always good to have something that makes easy sense. So happy with it.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Robson. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, abstentions, and carried. Thank you for that, Christine. That's 133. So now 134 to 139. $140.
So there was an issues and options paper put on your desk yesterday in terms of Enviro Hub, which was around the sustainable neighbourhoods. So that was on your desk. We'll come to that at the end of this, because we'd missed it and we should have picked it up, so it was tabled as an item yesterday. Yeah.
Quite a bit on pages 138 and 139. Okay, can I move forward? 140, 145. Thank you, Christine. The Bulldog, thank you.
There is that decision required. It actually goes on to 149, but it's that submission from Charlotte Clark about the Wells Ave Reserve Playground.
Yes, and it's on your green sheet as well.
Oh,
So
is
you've
it
got
there?
two
Okay.
options.
Okay,
So, yeah,
if it's picked up
working
there,
off
that's fine.
on both, so yep, so
Okay.
page 148.
Okay.
So option 1 is fund it, increase of capex of 12,000, opex of 8, or option 2 is do not fund.
OPEX of 600,000, 600, sorry.
$600, yeah.
Can I just ask a question, if that's all right? It's on page 135, submission 835 from Peter McKinley, just regarding the council adopt the essence of a community engagement charter. Where are we at with that as a council, as councillors?
What page? Oh, up there.
135. 135, submission 835.
Happy.
Just finding that, Councillor Kitty, but we are looking to incorporate the essence of your charter into the significance and engagement policy review, which is coming to you in about 3 weeks.
Can we please just go back to page 138 and relating to the marine precinct and the boat to truck vehicle access? So are we not planning to do anything unless we receive a grant, is that right, from the government, is it? Just want to double check where we are on that.
No, there's money included in the budget for it over a 2-year period. So we've pushed some into 2022 based on the cash flow of when realistically we'd be able to actually do that work. Any money that came through any sort of CIP funding would obviously reduce that cost, but it is included in the numbers.
Thank you. So do we have a specific location where that wharf will occur or where it will be built?
Engagement's ongoing at the moment with users down there in terms of actually the best location, but we do have a draft plan for it.
Just on that page 147 with Anzac Park, there was funding provided, but it's been deferred. Staff comment was it was a great idea, deferred, but it's now deferred again to the LTP. Is it really necessary for that to wait until 21? It's on the bottom of 147, it starts, submission 612, and then the top of page 148.
Well, we'll get Mark to talk to that.
Good morning. Yeah, during the public consultation exercise, there was a lot of feedback about that park. It's a great site. It's a good idea to do it. The 94K was for a, more or less what you might call a standard playground to provide for the community there. The feedback was they want more and they need some more accessible equipment. So that's an added cost of roughly 50 or 60,000, and we didn't have that. So we just parked it, and we'll come back to the LTP to see if that funding can be provided.
My concern is that means then, you know, you're into after July next year, really, plus construction and so on. What would the OPEX be of that extra 50?
I need to play with the pen for a while, but 50,000 divided by 20 years for the depreciation per annum, plus about 2,000 or 3,000 for playground. No, that's already budgeted, so it's just the depreciation and debt repayment.
I mean, this is a park that's been waiting a long, long time, and is surrounded by families that have lots of children and stuff. I mean, I'd be keen to see it, the additional added this year, and it go ahead soon. If there's any support for that.
We can check if there's any infill. I'm presuming this will be an old little infill area. If there's any DC sitting there, I'm not sure whether there are, so we could park it and just check that. There may be some in the reserve. I don't know, do you know, Jeremy?
There is. They've got a long list that they're using that money for, but this could substitute in potentially.
I mean, there is money perhaps from Kirlan Park that could be transferred to that one. Is it, or is it too far across geographically? And I'm not keen on finding the answer now. We can just, I'll move it. and then you can find a funding source.
You
in
can
different
move
ways.
it, and you can say with the first priority funding source being development contribution reserves if available, and otherwise loan funding. So that means it's in, and we'll do our best to see if we can if there's a DC balance we can apply, we'll use it, and if there's not, then the default is loan.
Happy to move that.
Thank you. Councillor Robson has, are you, sorry, are you seconding? Very good. Any more discussion?
Thrilled to see my old playground upgraded somewhat.
This is a new resolution,
No.
A conflict of
Sorry,
interest. I don't live there anymore.
This is not a new resolution, isn't it? Option 1? It is a new resolution.
Yeah, different playground.
Let's just get the resolution up so we all know we're all on the same song sheet. Thank you. Robin?
60k, Christine.
We have costed it. We're just ringing the member of staff who's got the cost, if you can give us a couple of minutes.
Christine's.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, Christine, we need to bring that amount forward.
We've just got, the councillors, if I could just draw you back to order, we've just got new information which is very germane to this. I'll just wait till Robin's finished typing. Thanks, Robin. And then I'll just get Mark to just to explain what's happened here. Thank you, Mark.
Good morning again. It's a great site, as I mentioned, and the community up there, it's an area where there's, you could argue politely, there's more need. Lower socio-economic area, the families are largely transitional, they come and go, the parents struggle to find work, there's less. You could argue strongly that there's a higher need for an improved level of service there, and there's also some children who are not as able as others, and the benefit of providing a playground for those guys, allow them to be included in the play, the fun, the recreation and the amenity of a local open space, costs a little bit more. So to include the footpaths, the accessible equipment, the playground upgrade, barbecue, and allow the families to spend a bit longer time there rather than just in for 20 minutes and out, and that's all accommodated in this, and it's based on the feedback we receive. But because of the level of the cost escalation, that's why we decided to ask you guys at the LTP rather than the annual plan.
Thank you very much, Mark. Given this new information, what are your feelings?
Happy to move.
Okay, and happy to second still. Just before we do that, I think Deputy Mayor Salisbury has a question.
Yeah, I've been involved in this community in the Gate Power Advisory since it began about 4 years ago, and it's got some amazing collaborative work going on down there. I just wonder if if there's a general feeling not to do the whole amount, if there was a way we could do part of the project going forward so that we can at least start it if we can't finish it this year. We can do the whole lot. Yeah, because this community has a great need, and I would definitely support this upgrade.
And I just a clarification of your question. If we were to start it, are you saying get external funding in some sort to finish it? Or?
No. I was just thinking if it didn't get across the line that we got the whole lot, is there a possibility of beginning something towards that plan in the shorter term?
Thank you, Mark.
We can look at the actual construction elements that be pulled out. Normally we would pull out the barbecue and the footpath, but the footpath or concrete provides access for those who are not as able, so we would have suggest we leave that in. We could pull the barbecue out, but we'd have to have a look at the design to see what elements we could pull out quickly.
Happy to move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Robson, second. Would you like to speak to your old playground?
Yeah, I grew up here. And I've watched over the years this become a really deprived area with tinny houses and gangs moving in and so on. And there's been a lot of great work go on with the group that meets at the primary school there, and Clifford Paxton's been a regular attender there. But the real trouble has been to find a group of people living there who are there long enough to form the nucleus of what eventually should become a community centre like in Maryvale. So this is a good first step, and I really appreciate what staff have thought about, that having a place where people will stay a bit longer, not just send their kids down to play, but actually gather themselves. That may foster a bit more interaction and collaboration, and then we could take another step with further support later, because it's a great place. I love growing up there. I'm sad to see that park still doesn't get used for more sports. I know Bay Plenty Sport is trying to look at it for training, for soccer or something, because that's a great thing that brings families together too, and I hope that will progress over time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bullock. Councillor Robson. Anybody else? Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, I'm very happy to support this project. I note that in more deprived areas, the playgrounds are used a lot more, particularly the Maryvale playground and the Alan McBride playground. There's always a lot of kids there because presumably that's a better option than, or maybe they don't have a PlayStation at home or whatever the case might be. So I think these are really good investment and they get well used in these communities. So yeah, very happy to support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robson, I don't think there's other speakers.
Yeah, this is, to me, is no different in a sense to our place. It's making community. It's making places. It's placemaking in a real, literally in the terms of the paths, concrete sense. And it's also a placemaking that really does need to happen, and it's designed to attract a very, very broad range of people. This is your classic more than 8 to 80. This is your 2 to 102 space. And we need to do more of this. Sometimes I think we're inclined to get distracted by the shiny stuff. And this is not a significant amount of money when it's amortised over the life of the park. This is a good idea.
Thank you very much. I'll put this to you then, Council. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Reserves? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Abstentions? Carried. Thank you very much. Councillors, moving now page 150 to 155. So we've got 151, yes.
There's still a Wells Ave decision needed on page 149 at the top.
Beg your pardon, yes.
I mean,
indeed,
I know it's on the
148,
green tick,
149. My apologies.
So just through the chair, in light of the previous decision, I think that we can work out a way to fund that through existing budgets and commit to getting that done in the current financial year.
Fantastic.
Could therefore support option 2.
Yeah, Councillor Bullock, thank you. Seconder for that, please.
No, there's nothing to move, is there? No,
Option
Oh.
two,
okay,
because it can be done within the current budget.
okay, yep, fine.
And Councillor Robson, or Councillor Hollis, seconded. Thank you very much.
Mount representatives could move it if they like, it's in their area.
All right, thank you. Councillor Kitty, would you like to talk to this? This is the World's Air Playground.
I just need some clarification. So we are going to get that done in the next budget, that is correct?
Yeah, we just don't need any money added to the annual plan to get it done.
Great, so it'll be done next year. That's fantastic. Yep, awesome. So just like the last thing, I think playgrounds are always great for bringing communities together, especially our children. There is nothing before Mount Jury once we head from Blake Park down, so I think it'll be a great asset to the community. Thank you.
Councillor Hollis. Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions and carried. Thank you very much.
Mr Mayor, that brings us, just before you move on to other pages, to at the bottom of 149, the submission regarding Monmouth Redoubt. There isn't a decision sought there, but it's worth just, I think, having a little comment on it, if we could, and seeing, I know it was on the list that Councillor Morris had sent out to us prior to deliberations. It is a worthy project, but the staff comment is that it can be delayed, and I tend to support that. But can I ask, when, as part of this project, we have talked over the years about the horrible sign that sits in the middle of that, reflecting a very different view of the time when the redoubt was occupied and so on. That has been of some offence, I think, to mana whenua of the area, and I just hope that as part of the redevelopment we may find some way to either counter that with another sign or change it. We don't want to pull down statues, but you know, it just does give a poor picture of the real reality of what was happening around that time in 1860.
Through the chair, we definitely include that as part of the project, looking at an option to address it.
Thank you, Councillor Robson.
Minded of the advice from Shamabu Yaka that horizontal infrastructure is not a great post-COVID means of stimulating economy, but vertical infrastructure, or basically stuff above the ground, is. I've looked at the Monmouth issue, and I was conscious that I think Councillor Morris originally had it down as an idea. I would, and yeah, look, if I may, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Morris's comment. We haven't spent anything yet. We have not spent anything yet. We don't start spending on this budget until we sign it off. And we need to consider what we are budgeting. And my view is this should go ahead. And so my question is, what's the actual OPEX cost for the next year for this project? Because I go right back to the beginning of, yeah, well, if I can get an answer to that question, I'm happy to move something.
The operational budget for Monmouth Redoubt is already in the budget. We maintain the site already, so there'll be no additional after the enhancements.
So in terms of depreciation life is...
we're not creating any new assets, maybe
Right.
a couple of signs. The interpretation panels are $5,000 or $6,000 each, so that repayment and depreciation is low on those. And it's mainly green assets, so it's about providing some stabilisation and changes and a footpath move, I think, and the footpath's already there. So the overall cost is minimal.
Yeah, that's correct.
Just another question, sorry.
Sorry, I'm happy to second that.
Just a question for staff. Are you able to get everything done in this financial year, or do you need consents and things before you can do the works?
At this stage, it's taken around 2 years worth of work to get where we're at. I can't guarantee that work will be completed in 1 year. We have to liaise with iwi, multiple groups. Yeah, it's difficult to say. We'd be aiming for it.
Look, this is, in a way, almost a base track issue, in a sense. If we get the relationships right, and we've developed some relationships around the base track interactions, then I believe we can do this quicker than we might otherwise be thinking. There's also the issue of the cost versus the return. And when I started at the beginning of yesterday, the first thing I pulled out was $70,000 sitting in an OPEX budget, which had, if you like, museum, history, culture in that space. And one of the things I was thinking about, besides the Bruce Farthing, if I can call it, initiative, was in fact this. And it's about, you know, doing stuff that's real and here now, rather than exploring things that have become political fights that have cost us an enormous amount of money, some reputational damage, and delivered very little for our community. I mean, I would implore my colleagues to support this. This is a low-cost, genuine celebration, reinvigoration of a significant part of our heritage. And I would, at the risk of embarrassing Councillor Baldock, say we do need to, if you like, recognise it in a number of dimensions, not just perhaps the singular dimension it's been recognised in previously.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. I fear I'm not going to sleep well tonight, and I may have nightmares because I'm perplexed that I'm starting to think like Councillor Robson, because I wrote here Mauel base track opportunity. I think from my perspective, while we're looking at the intensification of Te Papa, we have a real opportunity to honour and preserve the, the rich history and the culture of the entire Te Papa Peninsula, which stems, of course, as we know, from the Elms, via the Monmouth Redoubt, all the way up to Pukahinahina, and then particularly onto Tauranga. And having been at Tauranga, whenever it was, Larry, a month ago or so, not quite, a wet, miserable day, which it often is, I was saddened really that I thought, well, given the significance of that battle, post-Pukahinahina, Tauranga really does need some work done in a whole range of different ways. And there's apparently cows still wander around it, and you can see the revetment in the trenches. But I was left with an impression then that that entire Te Papa strip, cherishing the history and the culture that is so rich for New Zealand, not just for Tauranga Moana with the Western Bay of Plenty. We have a real opportunity to do something special here. So, I, like Councillor Robson, I urge my colleagues to support this. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate Councillor Robson inquiring further here, because, you know, the 250,000 in the report was the official or the original thing, and I think maybe why Councillor Morris pulled back on it. But when we see what it is actually going to cost being debt funded, it's definitely worth the investment this year. It is our history, and it should be preserved and the stories told, and they'll be told from two different cultures, which is the way it should be. But at the moment, my comments earlier were that it was not balanced. It didn't reflect who the aggressors really were and who was really cowering in fear prior to the Battle of Goat Park. So I hope that that story will be told in a balanced way, and I certainly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I just wonder, within the resolution, do we need to put a figure in here?
We can just say bring forward the existing budget.
You're happy with that?
Is that okay, Mark?
Anybody else would like to speak to this? As you can read, it includes the Monmouth Redoubt Historic Reserve Restoration and the AP bringing back the original budget. All those in favour, please. Sorry, Councillor Robson.
I couldn't resist. And having Ryder reply on this is wonderful. I'd be more than happy to sit down with our local historian, Buddy McKyree, and help write a balanced view of the story of Te Papa Peninsula. I'd happy to contribute that time.
Very good. I think, isn't it pretty obvious? We won the first one and lost the second one, or maybe the other way around. Anyway, can I put this to you, Council? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. Which I think then moves us to page 151, the installation of the 2 new public dump sites.
Just on that one, if you're comfortable, we'd just like to park it. We're just getting some more information from the staff as to whether we've got an available site and we've got a resource consent and can we actually build it within the financial year. So can we just park this while we get a little bit more detail?
Sorry.
Councillor Hughes.
Could I just discuss the Kopererua Valley project? Is this the best? There's
What
a
page?
page 149, Jerry Hodgson submission. But there's a couple of submissions around it. So we missed out on CIP funding for the Kopererua. I don't know a lot about this project, but what I do know is that it's a really amazing tourism and recreational and biodiversity opportunity. And I'm just wondering, in this financial year, where are we at? Where are we languishing with this project, or is there opportunity now that we don't have CIP funding to progress any part of this which keeps it trucking along? I just wondered if I could get some feedback on that and check how people are sitting with that. Mark, would you be able to?
Thanks very much,
be happy
Christine.
to? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
The project for the improvements in the Kopererua Valley are quite well progressed. The consent was to develop over a period of 20 years. During that time, we've developed a development plan or an implementation plan, and we did that with the Rotary Millennial Trust and Ngāi Tamarawaho. There are 2 key stakeholders plus the community, and we updated that 3 years ago. And Mark Deans, who came and sat here, was part of the working group to develop that new plan. That new plan we took to the last LTP, and we secured, the elected members provided funding to continue with that development. The main components of that are access to all the local communities. So we've got the main leg through, and then you've got the access to the various different suburbs or roads. It's about stream realignment. In the early farming days, they just straightened the stream thinking they would get the water out quicker. Doesn't necessarily work. So we're looking at, this year we sought the design and consent to do the stream realignment, which is putting it back to its original alignment, working closely with the regional council, Ngāi Tamarawaho, and our stormwater engineers to be able to provide a suitable stormwater solution in there. And there's also some stormwater ponds to accommodate for the subdivisions over the other side of the state highway. We're looking at a major wetland restoration. We've won 2 awards for this site, as TCC has. It's over 200 hectares. It's the largest urban wetland regeneration in the southern hemisphere, we believe. We can't prove it. It's fantastic, and we're looking at, there's another $5.7 million in the LTP to continue with that work. And we're looking at wetlands, new plantings, areas for people to sit back and watch and enjoy the wildlife that we hope to attract in there, improving the walkways and other works as well. It's a fantastic project, but elected members have already funded it.
Through the chair, if I could just add, in terms of the preliminary work we've done for the Caring for Communities and the Job for Nature funding opportunity that's coming out of central government, this is one of the projects that we see really top of the list alongside the MOO implementation plan. So we're just kind of rallying our thinking, but this is one that we'd absolutely put forward to potentially accelerate some of the stuff we're trying to do down there.
And that item's still whiteboard parked about funding to enable us to do that creative caring communities application. So it's still a matter for you to come back to later in deliberations as to whether you want to put resources to enable us to make those funding applications.
Great. So the main thing is that we're not in our decisions today holding that project back based on nice.
progressing nicely, it's well funded, and if we can accelerate it, we will.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bulldog.
Just for clarification, what we're progressing is the plan from the trust referred to in the staff report, not the plan that was put forward as part of the submission, which
Yes.
is a much more recent development and has not had real consultation with the original trust members.
Yeah, I can confirm the plan we're putting forward is the one that we worked in a co-design fashion with the Trust and Ngāi Tamarauaho, not the one from Jerry.
And it was the one that was agreed to when Route K was put through as part of the whole transport plan, so it's not something we can muck around with too much.
Yes, I agree.
Can I just
Yes.
ask how we're, because it's a fantastic story, are we telling that story through our website, through our channels, through our so that people know and don't go off on their own tangents with what they want to do with that area where we've already got this incredible plan?
We have our own webpage on the TCC website with videos and some information. And during the submission process, prior to Jerry's presentation, we provided it to Jerry and is it Mr. Wasang as well. So they had that info. And we do engage regularly with many from the community.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hollis.
According to the submitters, as part of the Billion Trees program, that our city has around 30 million trees to plant to do our part of that, and the K Valley, I think if it includes Smith's Farm, includes 1 million trees that we could plant. I think it includes Smith's Farm though in their submission, but it's still a significant number of trees towards that plan. That would be a fairly cool marketing piece, and I'm wondering whether we're adding that to the pot when we tell people how great the project is.
Is there an answer to that question on the trees, particularly with K Valley and Smith's Farm?
Yeah, I can. We plant many trees across the city every year. In terms of street trees and reserve trees, we plant between 750 and 1,000 trees a year. And in terms of revegetation, which are effectively trees, they get to roughly 11 metres. In the last financial year, we planted 81,000. So that's in Moal, the Dunes, K Valley, and a number of other passive reserve sites. The query around planting in K Valley is it's not supposed to be just a forest, it's also wetland regeneration and managing stormwater, so you can't plant the whole 200 hectares. And the trust have agreed to the planting plan that's in there, and we work with the trust and we go through in stages. So clearly we need to retire the grazing. The grazer in there saves us a lot of money for mowing, etc. But we'll gradually retire that grazing, and then we'll come in behind with the planting plan. So it needs to be a managed retreat in terms of grazing and managed plantation enhancements.
It was just more about the marketing to let the public know. That's as I mentioned in the submissions, it could well be our central park, and it could be a beautiful green jewel in the middle of the city.
Sometimes we do need an iwi representative sitting around this table, because the difference between those plantings is that the trust is keen to plant trees. That proposal was about exotic, non-native trees, which would be totally anathema to what the trust were trying to do and what they had agreed to in the beginning. So that's where we have to be careful, I think, with just planting trees. They've got to be native trees in that valley.
Thank you very much, everyone. Councillor Robson.
To the next topic, submission with regard to New Zealand Motor Caravan Association, the pump stations.
Hey, what page are you on, John?
151, I believe it is.
It is at the very bottom, thank you.
It's under main theme of submission, stormwater for installation of pump stations. I'd like to move option 2, I believe it is, option 1. So this is page 151, 2 public dump stations.
Asked to be parked, we're just checking if we've actually got a site and whether we've got a resource consent for a site and we can actually build it. So we're just checking. If we don't, we might just suggest that we put some planning money in. So we've parked it, we'll come back to it.
My bad, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Foreshadowed, I foreshadowed.
Indeed, foreshadowed dexterously. Which... Okay. Yep, anything up to page 155, Council. Uh, 156 to, say, 160, 61. Bulldog.
Yeah, on page 158, Tristan Benge's submission regarding Greaton, and there are a number of other submissions that were somewhat related. Just in the staff comment and reply, I wonder if we could, two things. One, if we could make it very clear for all of the submitters in regard to this project that, and don't take my word for it, someone needs to investigate it, but to my knowledge there has never been 4 lanes between the 2 roundabouts in Greaton. It's always been 2-laned through the shopping area of Cameron Road, but many of them say we want those 4 lanes restored, and that was never the case. Couldn't we have that clarified and responded to the submitters? Or if it was 4-laned, it must have been way back in the days of a gravel road, I think, because I've never seen it. But yeah, there were 4 lanes to the Cornwall Street roundabout, and there were 4 lanes on the other side, but there was always 2 lanes through, which meant you always had traffic having to merge there. And the second thing is, in her submission, she mentioned about the underpass, and it does refer there to the fact that was investigated and ruled out. I think that would be useful to be shared with many of the submitters too, as one of the options at one point we thought might solve the problem but didn't.
Thank you very much. So 161 to 167, which ends this block.
Has bus shelters come up anywhere yet? Oh, there it is. Bus shelters, page 156, sorry. Could we...
Nick, thank you. Can you speak to that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so so with regards to bus shelters, so for the annual plan we have 13 identified sites for the 2021 financial year. We have in total 45 sites identified where we could put them in around the city. And a couple of points I would like to make around that is that there are 2 things happening during this calendar year. One is policy from Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency, which will identify a level of service and some criteria around site selection and basically criteria for identifying and investing in bus stops and how they need to function and the level of service. And for us to put better evidence behind our site selection, we would really like to have that at hand by the time we crank the site selections up. And the second thing that is happening later this year is the introduction of the B card, the bus payment swipe on and off card, which will give us a lot more intelligence around patronage utilisation, where people get on and off, so that we get evidence behind the sites that we do select. So why I'm saying that is that we could put in a lot more bus shelters at the moment, but with very little evidence as to the utilisation or patronage. We could increase it. I would say that we could prudently probably increase it from 13 to around 20 and know with certainty that they would be good ones to invest in for the financial year, but beyond that, it's a little bit of a guessing game. And as you know, bus services changed about a year and a half, 2 years ago. We, before that happened, we put a moratorium on the installation of bus shelters, so we do have a bit of catching up to do. But we also feel somewhat reluctant to rush into it, for want of a better term. So we put in some last year. I think there were, I can't remember, I don't quite know the number, but bus routes do change early on in the introduction of new services, and if the route turns around and goes down a street the other way, then then you've wasted the money. So we do want the patterns to settle down. We want more evidence behind it, and also we would actually like to have the policy for site selection behind us.
Thank you. That makes sense.
What would the cost implication be for another 5? If we were to include 20, as opposed to the budget that we have at the moment, what would the budget implication be to increase that?
They're about $15,000 each.
Supplement.
Thank you. Councillor Robson, followed by Councillor Arby.
Depending on location, there are there are advertising funded ones on high frequency routes, but the advertisers or the company that does that is quite picky. So there might be 1 or 2 free ones, but I think we'd probably need to assume that they would be $15,000 each.
Robson, followed by Councillor Arby, followed by Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, it's a question on this topic, and it's something that concerns me greatly, and that is the issue about putting bus stops in and then changes to service. Now, the obvious answer to this is you put a hook on the top of a container, right? And you put the container in and it becomes a bus stop. And when the bus route changes, you simply lift it up, put it on the back of a truck and move it to where it needs to be. So my fundamental question is any work being done? By the way, the container is an industrial icon of the 20th century, right? But is there, exactly, I see a large pile of containers. Is there any work being done in the movable bus stop space? Because it seems to me, who has no knowledge of, my knowledge of transport is I drive a car, but is there any work being done in this space? Because I hear people talking about printable bus stops and all the rest of it, but we have containers you can rip the front out of. We've got quite a pile sitting down here doing not much. Is there any work being done in the space? Because quite seriously, the argument that we don't put bus stops in because the service is going to move, make the bus stops movable. This is not rocket science. It's not even transport science.
My question is, how much does it cost to move the bus stops, because they are movable?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, what's the craneage costs? All of those sort of things. It isn't just the material per se. And just to hazard a guess, the staff time that goes into the identification, the drive arounds, the selection process, the consultation, is it the actual bus stop that is the greatest cost, or is it other associated overheads? I would probably hazard a guess that they would be about equal. So which we probably shouldn't just focus on the cost of the material and installation per se. I could also see the idea of having 20-foot containers with a side cut out of them moving around. There'd be all sorts of health and safety issues around that. We would still have to consult on the locations. You'd have overhead power cables where we put them in, and all sorts of issues that we would have to work through. So if there's something you want us to investigate and come back on, I'd be happy to do that. And in the meantime, we haven't got any developed options to how we do them at the moment.
I had councillors Arbery, Hughes and Bullock in that order. Councillor Hughes.
Couple of questions. So if we were to say up it to 20, you're suggesting that those, because I can personally I can count a few that, you know, outside retirement villages and schools, etc., that are likely not to shift. Are you saying that there's probably 20 there that if the that wouldn't move, given, so that we could go up to 20 and they would be pretty dead set to be ones that would be on continual bus routes?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what's the OPEX part of that equation? If we were to take it today up to 20 buses from 12, what's the? Do you know what the OPEX component of that is?
No, I would have to look into that and come back to you. I think we do have some numbers around that. Yeah. It'd be a very the difference would be a very small number in relation to the total budget that we have for the whole city. So the budget we have is not just the difference between 13 and 20, but the difference between the overall number of bus stops that we operate and the 20. Mm.
I think, just to put it in perspective, if we were to increase the number of bus stops that we try to implement this coming year, each bus stop, the capital cost $15,000. Cut that in half because it's 50% subsidised by NZTA. 7 at 7,500 is circa 50,000. Sure, there might be a bit of operational cost for a few broken windows or something throughout the year, but look, the reality is by and large, we should be able to do that with an existing budget, I would have thought. Or if you want to dedicate another $75,000 to see us try and implement, I think that's something that council can make a decision on and move forward.
I'd like to move when ready.
I'd second it. Can I just ask another question though? That's the CapEx. So what is the rate impact of adding, you know, another 20 to the potential for the forthcoming year?
So it'd be depreciation and interest on that. So you'd be talking 5% of that cost. So if it was 75,000, 3 to 4,000.
Right. 10,000 into the rates could deliver quite a number of shelters in the coming year. Am I reading it correctly? I mean, that's a small sum for getting going with our infrastructure around the bus. And if we don't spend it all, it's a carry forward into the next year. But is that a reasonable?
Yep, that's it. Yep, broad brush.
Very good.
Just for clarification, Councillor Bullock, you mentioned an additional 20. We're not looking at an additional 20.
But we could. We could ramp it up here and make a bit more progress. If we just said whatever 10,000 will produce as a motion of actual rate impact, we can then do what we can deliver in the next year.
Yeah, and that increase will help us catch up a little bit quicker over a couple of years, so we'll be in a good position. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollis has a question.
Sorry. Just to keep things in perspective, that we're doing this for about 1,000 people a day in the top end. We've got around 11 buses at any one time parked around this block that we're sitting in. And if we wanted some mobile bus stops, we could park them anywhere in the city and use them for people to sit in and wait for their actual bus. And that would be good for the environment, less fumes and things, and also better fuel economy on the buses. A far better option and far better use of buses that are going to that mystical, not in service suburb.
Be a great speech when we move the motion. Just one more thing on buses, if I could raise from the submitters, and then we'll look for a motion. But I saw something very innovative that Blue Haven mentioned. on page 166 that, given their developments out there, they're saying they support bus shelters along the boulevard where public transport route is to focus, being the main arterial route. Wouldn't it be a great thing going forward with both their development there into Titumu, into Tauriko, if we got the developers to put the bus shelters in along the sections before they're sold, before we have to go through processes of objection? We basically decided where they all should be, and we might get them to pay for it. Can we have that as a sort of strategy going forward, perhaps considered?
That is part of how we operate. So we in new developments, we try to figure out where the routes are and make them part of the...
We sort of didn't along Pies Par Road when we allowed all those sections there. Now we're having to deal with objections. I mean, that's a smaller development, Nick, I understand. But it's even at that point when people come in with a building consent for a row of houses on a road that's going to have a bus going down it, we should be working in a bus stop.
Thank you. As I understand it, we have Councillor Hughes has moved and Councillor Baldock has seconded.
Can we have some wording?
Yeah. Just one moment, Councillor Robson. I just want to start us. Oh, it's a question. I beg your
Question on
pardon.
this topic. Yeah, look, I just want to clarify, and I have some sympathy with Councillor Hollis's somewhat wry observation, but that does have other issues. Clarify, I'm worried that this is a classic input versus outcome discussion. So we put it in the budget, we feel good. But my understanding is one of the reasons we struggle to get bus stops on the ground is certain people in our community who feel unduly affected by them object. So what I'm looking for is some sort of confirmation that if we put this in the budget, we will in fact get the outcome we're seeking. Because otherwise we're running into the space of virtue signalling potentially. So I'm looking for confirmation from staff that we will get the outcome we're seeking. I support the outcome. I'm just wanting confirmation that we will get the outcome that we're seeking by making this decision.
Yeah, so right now, Councillor Robson, that would be hard to argue because we do put them in where we do drive-overs, where we find the locations and where we hear from people that they do want them put in. Whereas when we have a policy for the installation, level of service, site selection, and when we get the swipe on, swipe off detailed information from patronage, that evidence will be there. So I think we'd struggle early in the year, but I think towards the end of the financial year we will have good evidence. And I think if we set the path to crank the numbers up for the future, we're catching up evidence-based rather than on people asking for it. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Nick. So Heidi and Larry, can we just hear from you? And
Yes, I'd like to move that we put $10,000 into OPEX and aim for 30 bus stops or thereabouts, whatever we can pull off.
I'm happy to second.
Be clear, do you want to put whatever it delivers, or do you want to bracket that with 30 bus stops? We've got 20 currently, which is an additional 7 on budget.
Whatever $10,000 in OPEX will deliver, but what does that mean on CAPEX then? Do we need to... Doesn't matter. You work it out.
Through the chair, suggest we normally put that through as a CAPEX item and the OPEX would flow, because we need to put both in, so it would be the equivalent version.
Getting advice from the old dogs.
Wrong place.
We can, great advice from Chief Executive. He's saying just talk about bus stop numbers.
Okay, great. I'd like to suggest that we aim for 30 bus stops in this next financial year.
And I'll second that.
Very good. Councillor Hughes, do you want to talk to that?
I do. Yes, I stand out on a bus stop in the cold with a whole lot of high school students every day, often, and there has been a lot of issues, obviously, with getting these things across the line. It's not been an easy road because we understand that there's objections and you have to go through a certain process. But if we can widen that net and get that process flowing for 30 bus stops rather than 10, then we can hopefully progress that. And I think in terms of the future and maybe having to move those, then we've still got 5 years of people actually getting on our bus system and making it successful before we might need to move those anyway. I quite frankly think that there's easily 30 bus stops that we can find that won't be changing, that will help our elderly and our more vulnerable people to have some shelter while they're looking for a bus. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. Councillor Bulldog.
Yeah, we always have this conversation about how many people are currently riding the bus, but if one of the reasons they're not is that they have to stand there without shelter waiting for it, then we will be removing one of the objections. And we will have the B card through soon, which will give us the good data. So, this is over the next year that we'll be installing these. We have to work through the objection process where necessary, but I think, as Councillor Hughes said earlier, you can probably identify this many sites where there wouldn't be objections and get them in and improve the service that we're trying to promote.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Arby, followed by Councillor Morris.
Just did a quick back of the envelope calculation. I think that works out to be just under $8,000 of OPEX, assuming 5% depreciation, something in that order, which isn't a lot of money, and it is something that a lot of submitters have raised as something that's a low-cost pain for them. I did just want to talk about, there's a lot of discussion about 3D printed bus shelters or using containers as bus shelters, which are good innovative ideas, but the existing technology is pretty affordable. It's not, we're not going to save a whole lot of money by bringing in new technology. If those things are $7,000 and a container costs $5,000, before you retrofit it, I'm not sure what the big saving is. Half the cost, as we've just heard, is actually the investigations. And to move these things, all you have to do is get a HIAB. Once you've got a site, they unbolt them. You have to pour a concrete pad and drill in some new bolts and bolt the existing bus shelter down in the new location. So it's not, the cost of that is the hireage of a truck and a contractor, and really the process of identifying a new site. So yeah, these aren't completely sunk costs. These things are reusable, and it's not the end of the world, I think.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I do support the resolution. I think it's important, and there is an immorality to leaving people out in the wet and the cold, particularly people who are seniors. It's not cool. That being said, there's also a little bit of irony that we're talking about moving shelters once they're in place. And I think we know the reason for that. It's because there isn't one entity, either regional council or city council, which controls the service. And that's incredibly frustrating because, we're talking about, the dynamics and the cost of moving things because our partners may change the routes. And I think there may be, if I'm so bold, there might be some ambition around this table. They do change their service away from perhaps interchanges and that sort of thing, which we have had significant capex in our budgets for. In terms of being undercover, that's really important. Buses are really good at crushing congestion, but I can tell you something that's even better at crushing congestion, and that's Judith Collins. She's a cracker. She's just announced $31 billion in transport spending, building a 4-lane highway from Whangarei to Tauranga, including, speaking of being undercover, keeping on topic, a Kaimai tunnel. So to be built by 2030, that's bold, that's leadership, that's huge news for Tauranga. Fantastic.
I'd just like to speak to this as well. Councillor Morris has obviously read the Leader of the Opposition's press release somehow, which is huge news for Tauranga, which is great. It's a curious day for me. I find myself agreeing wholeheartedly with Councillor Morris now too. So clearly something's happened. But I just agree entirely that if we can get the left and the right hand of the Western Bay of Plenty's public transport capability or lack thereof in one room, we will be in a much better position. And I think there will be will around this table for that to happen. It seems very disjointed, and half the problems, as without wanting to repeat it, are due to a complete dislocation of services and orientation and perhaps even philosophy, I don't know. But I welcome the opportunity to get one team in one room working to one plan. I think that will help hugely. So this certainly has my support too. Anyone else? Councillor Clout.
Yeah, I fully support the this resolution. I'll be very surprised though if we achieve or deliver 30 bus stops in Tauranga City. I don't think we've ever done that in a single year, and I'll be very surprised if that happens again. If we do achieve 30 bus stops in this year, I'll take the bus to work every day for a month. There we go.
I recorded that.
Yes, thank you, councillors. If we can just stay on topic for just a moment longer. Yeah, I think, are we ready to, can I put this to you, please? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. I think in the circumstances we might just have a 15-minute break and then come on to Councillor Morris's additions. What's that?
We'll get through the rest of these and then we can go.
Oh, I thought we. Sorry, I've just sorry. Just stand by 2 seconds. Sorry, right. I'm absolutely right. Thanks, Marty. If we could just go through right on through quickly to page 167. Thank you, Larry. And if there's anything, just to so we can end it there and then come back to Steve's additions.
We also have the table item on the sustainable neighbourhood stuff. We also have the tabled item, the one we missed off in the agenda, which is part of this 10.3.
Yeah, all right, let's just do this quickly before the break. Councillor Hughes, I know you wanted to speak to this.
It's a one-pager, and the only other thing that we wanted to add as staff is another option, we did this late, is that you could consider these projects once you have your sustainability framework in place, and you would prioritise this expenditure relative to other initiatives in the sustainability space. So that's another option you can consider. And this also could come out of could go into the Caring for Communities application. So there's just a range of options you could think about, and we didn't have them all on the sheet. Apologies.
I'd like to move that we give $20,000 to this project to get it up and running in 2 communities.
Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder. Would you like to speak to that now, Heidi? Oh, yeah, actually, can we... So you've got the wording of the staff recommendation at the bottom of that single sheet, but I think you're adding to the 10,020. Is that correct? If I heard you correctly?
That's right. I want to change it to 20,000. I'll speak to it.
Yep. So it's option 1 of the single sheet.
10 grand.
Is that correct, Heidi? Option 1 of the single sheet?
Yes.
Changing 10 to 20.
Want to increase that to 10 to 20.
Yeah, but otherwise the wording remains extant.
An additional.
There's already 2 in it, so put the 2 and the 20,
Yes, an additional 10. No, an additional 10, sorry. No.
An additional 10, making the sum total 20.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are you...
which includes 2.
Does that work for you? Yeah.
So if it's an additional 10, it's 20, and I don't know if that affects the OPEX by double. I suspect it doesn't. But option 1 is an addition. Does everybody have this sheet of paper? Yeah. it would need to read an additional 20, which would give you the extra 10
I see.
that you wanted.
Thank you.
Right, so Andrew's happy to continue with this increase of $10,000 to second the motion.
Thank you.
Is it 20 plus 2?
Which takes it to 20,000. It shouldn't be an additional 10 to
No,
take it.
can we get Paul to clarify this, please?
Oh, see, yeah, an
So-
additional 20,000.
Yes,
Yep,
so
sorry.
For clarity, there's no
As
money
you
in the
were.
budget. The submission is for an additional 10, so we're asking for 10 on top of that. So from our budget perspective, it's an additional 20.
Yep.
Can I get clarity on the second to last line where it says also an additional ongoing operational cost of 2,000? Where's that go? Does that come from the 20 or does that come, or is that 22?
Understanding the 20, it's hard to say what whether there'd be additional maintenance on top of that as well.
If there's an additional 10, I'd be happy to cull the extra 2,000 to leave it at a flat 20.
Yeah, that's fine. 20. That's fine. 20 or total.
Then we would remove also an additional ongoing operational cost.
Well, it's absorbed within the 20, but yes.
Yep.
So it's a total of 20 that includes OPEX and CAPEX.
Yep,
So Heidi, did you want to speak to it? And
I do. So EnviroHub are an incredible, these guys make money spin into much more than anyone can. They work on a grassroots level with a whole lot of volunteers. They do incredible work. We fund them zero. We've always funded them zero. So we haven't really had the opportunity to see them shine. And yet we have, in that they once a year run sustainable backyards, which they run for $50,000 and put on over 200 events throughout our city. We don't fund that either. But a lot of our other co-councils do help to a certain extent with them. But what I'd like to see through this project is the opportunity for EnviroHub to show us what they can do. And in raising it by $10,000, that gives them the opportunity to actually resource this project a little bit. They've put it in incredibly low, only because they've never had any success with council before. Now, when we want to see a project done, we want to see it done in a way that actually gives them the opportunity to let it shine. So the sustainable, this project is for a neighbourhood to start looking at how they can work together to come up with solutions. It's not only just for community backyard development of their sustainable systems, but it's also about connecting that community together. And one thing we find more and more in our neighbourhoods is that we become sort of autonomous in our own family groups, and there's less and less ability or kind of cohesion between neighbourhoods. And what this project is doing is showing an idea where neighbourhoods get the opportunity to share and come together and start to work as a collective in not only their social interactions, but in terms of their local environmental solutions. So I'd really like to be able to give this project some legs. Thanks.
thank you very much. Councillor Hollis.
This is one of those things where I dislike the word sustainable used. This is just sensible. We talk about 60% of our waste being compostable and organic, and we throw it away. And this gives a position for local communities to collect and utilise it in their own gardens. One of my pet peeves is seeing nicely mown grass verges that could be food for the whole community. We talk about the food bank, and I forget how much we're giving to the food bank now, but it's in the tens of thousands. But if communities are growing food, the excess food is utilised wherever it needs to be in the community, and we've forgotten how to do that. So I support anything that allows extra food to be grown, extra or less waste to be thrown out, and for communities to come together. This is a very good community oriented project.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to? Councillor Clout.
Yeah, look, I think this is a fantastic project and initiative, and EnviroHub have done a lot of good work over the years. But yesterday we voted to increase our sustainability funding from 200,000 to 400,000, and in my view, this particular 400,000 bulk fund, as it were, that should be utilised for this specific project. So I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Robson.
That requires a reply. Oh dear. There is a significant difference between the requirement for a strategic framework which will guide the spending literally over a long-term plan of billions of dollars and a community level, grassroots, real, and I quite like the phrase that Andrew Hollis was using, sort of more grow and less throw, initiative. And if someone struggles to distinguish between what we're trying to do with the ISAB strategically and create a framework that's going to guide billions of capex and differentiate the importance of that and the return on that from the return on this project, it beggars belief. What are they asking for BMS students nowadays since I left?
That's the right question. Actually had Councillor Baldock followed by Councillor Morris.
I was just going to leap to the same speech, so I'll pass on it. I think there is a difference between the two funds. And
very good. Thank you. Councillor Morris.
There certainly is a difference between the two funds, but in rushing to the defence of my colleague, Councillor Clout, it's my view that the $400,000 allocated, $200,000 above what was essentially the recommendation, what was in the draft, in my view was an ill-disciplined splurge, and our ratepayers are going to be paying for it up there. Move over Phil Goff, move over Auckland Council, here comes Tauranga, and it's those sorts of decisions that we made yesterday that we need to revisit very carefully. It was ill-disciplined in my view, and so Councillor Clout is actually right on the button. Yes, there is a difference between strategy and actually doing something. And there is a difference between making up numbers, like we did yesterday, and actually getting something on the ground. So I actually support Councillor Clout in this. It was an ill-disciplined spend and needs to be revisited.
You, as anybody else? That being the case, I'll put this to you. All those in favour, please say aye. If I can see hands up relatively high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And against 3, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Carried. Now we can have the break. Thank you. Time is, say, 10 past. If we can be back by 25 past, that'd be great. Thank you. We're moving now to Councillor Morris's additions, if I can find them somewhere. Thank you very much, Robin, which Robin's going to bring up. So we're talking, there we are, 10.3 XD ENF. Councillor Robson, I beg your pardon, Councillor Morris, I'll pass over to you.
That's all right. We've been known to hang out together. Thank you. In terms of, how would you like me to do this? I can move everything.
Particularly costly, is it? What about one at a time?
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought, what's happened? I was just dialing 111. Right. Yeah.
Yes, I think if we could take them one at a time. Thanks for that, CEO.
I'm prepared to move D. There's a second. Yeah. Is there a friendly neighbourhood councillor? I'll second that. Thank you.
Can we all understand this a bit more, perhaps? Thank you.
It's already in the pages we've gone past, but it's Mount Menshed submission. So just in speaking to it, the staff response to the Mount Menshed was that they need to work together with perhaps badminton and perhaps another organisation to collaborate to site somewhere on one of these two reserves. The issue with the Menshed has been historically that they have heavy tools which require a concrete foundation. And of course, when you are placing a building on a public reserve, you need to have a removable building. So the solution they've come up with is, rather than putting a concrete floor, which would not be permissible, is to have a removable building with only a concrete pad for the heavier things. And so that's a solution they've come to. Now, rather than sort of, they've been looking at this for years. They're ready to do the funding. It is a need in terms of the community out there. And rather than sort of just say, go away and collaborate or that sort of thing, by providing a paper, it provides a bit more impetus to both them and to us to bring it to a head and to grant a piece of land for them to use. Not grant a piece of land, but lease a piece of land for them to use. And it kind of brings it to a head. So that's the rationale behind that one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty, I think you were going to second this. Did I pick that? Thank you. Would you like to speak next? And then we'll go to Councillors Granger, Bulldog. Yeah.
I'm just assuming that the paper will investigate, whether in fact it can fit now that we've got badminton going there, because that was the difficulty before. Is that correct, the mover?
Yes, that's correct, and that's why there's a couple of options there too.
You, Councillor Granger.
Just a question through the chair to Councillor Morris. Look, I presume there would be, if this does go ahead, a close liaison with the Menshed and Tauranga. And why I say that is that they've been there certainly for a long time in existence, and they certainly have done exceptionally well, especially for the likes of the community. So will there be sort of a I don't know whether you could call it a double up of what they've done there, or in other words, is there going to be some close liaison?
In answer to the question, there is a national Menshed body which has sheds all throughout the country. The exception is the Tauranga one, which is the Tauranga Menshed, but it's not part of the national body. So there is a need out in Mount Maunganui for this, but the Mount Maunganui one would be part of the national Menshed network. The Tauranga one is independent of that body.
Questions? We can go to Councillor Kitty first, please, as the seconder. Councillor Hughes?
I just recognise that the Menshed, they create all sorts of things for local primary schools, for kindies, for the library. They connect with, and one of the biggest problems that we have going forward is loneliness, and this provides a place for men who might have lost their sheds. I know my dad had to lose his shed back in the day, and it was a terrible thing. They have a set up shed, and then you get to a stage where you have to make decisions to move into a smaller space. So this allows a really great resource that not only gives men something that they can do in their retirement, but a way to socialise and get together. Lots of win-win benefits.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bulldog.
I've heard them come and make submissions for a number of years. It'd be fabulous to see them get housed. Makes a shed load of good sense, I think.
Thank you very much. So I think in that case, we will put 10.3 XD to you for the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you, Council. Councillor Morris, XE.
Yes, I move E, and if there's a friendly colleague, Councillor Baldock, I think, is indicating he might be a friendly colleague to second it. Very friendly. And if I may speak to it, Your Worship.
Mover, just a question before he does speak.
Sure.
Would he be willing to add in that, because we had that submission from Blue Haven that they were open, so is it worth us, and maybe staff may comment whether we might put in there that we also have those discussions with Blue Haven out there?
Yes, that's what the second part of the proposed resolution is kind of aiming at, but if you wanted to be specific and mention Blue Haven, that would be...
Or just developers would be fine, in the area that may be able to provide it on a better basis, if that's possible.
So as part of the LTP process, there's a piece of work looking at community facilities across the whole of the city, and that will also look at community halls, community spaces, etc. So, and then you can look at how you want to prioritise those across the entire network, and we'll discuss that at the policy workshop on the LTP on the 28th. So, I mean, this can go into part of that mix, but it's not, it's across the entire city, so it's underway as a piece of thinking.
Thank you, and speaking to it, if I may.
Yes, please.
The Wairaki Community Centre Trust comes in once a triennium to seek the endorsement of the incumbent council of the day, and they've had that endorsement from the previous two councils. They're coming to this council asking for reaffirmation that when a community centre is built in Papamoa East, that they be invited to collaborate with council. There is an advantage to that in that being a trust they may have access to alternate funding that council would not normally be able to access, because I remember there was an application once for funding for the Arataki Community Centre that got rebuffed from a trust because it was an application by council, and they said, why don't you put your rates up, etc. So there is a possibility in that collaboration that helps. And also in terms of working with developers, specifically Blue Haven, they came and Nathan York in his submission said that they would be open to discussing lease and design build options, and I think that's something we need to explore in time. I know that that's on the staff radar, but this just kind of cements that it's something that we're going to do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bulldog.
Yeah, I think it's also consistent with messages we've heard from BVL over the years about the community halls we have and the need for really good community centres in many of our communities across the city. That relates this one to Wairaki, but there's and where we put libraries, of course, that's a great catalyst for a community centre around it. Yeah, every community needs a place where people can see their various needs met, and this is a good project.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robson.
I may, through the chair, to either the mover or to staff, the collaboration proposed doesn't imply exclusivity. In other words, if another trust in that community, it's a massive community and a rapidly growing one. I understand Papamoa is actually our largest suburb, the mayor of Papamoa told me recently. It doesn't imply exclusivity. I'm just checking that Thank you.
Yep.
If it did, it would say that in the resolution.
It's what we do.
Yeah, I'd just also like to note that the huge value there are in community centres within walking and cycling distance from where people live to really gather people and enable bumping spaces and indoor spaces too in throughout the year. And I also want to then set our eyes over Tauriko and make sure that, because this is a relatively new community, and these should be built at the time when the community is actually being developed, not in retrospect when the community is crying out for it. So I'd like to think that we looked at very carefully at our timelines for Tauriko in terms of when we put these community centre facilities together to front foot these before they have to be a retrospective ask. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you very much. And this certainly has my support as well, without wanting to repeat anything. Community centres are extremely important, and it's almost time to dust off the Mount Maunganui Borough Council chains, I would suspect, at this rate. So can I put to you, Council, 10.3XE, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, abstentions and carried. And the last one, Steve, just an understanding of the active reserve status. You're moving it to sports fields as opposed to a general use park, is that correct?
Yes.
Talk us through that, thank
you. So I'm happy to move F if there's a friendly councillor. Thank you, yeah. And speaking to it with your leave, Mayor, Simpson Reserve used to be the active reserve for Papamoa before Gordon Spratt Reserve was developed in the 90s, early 90s. And members who were around last triennium will remember that there was supposed to be another active reserve in Waiarake. It was zoned, but the cost of purchasing that land and developing it was going to be in the order of around $30-odd million. And so we allowed that to be rezoned through a special housing area. Yes, it was a special housing area process. And now there are currently houses on that area that was supposed to be a reserve. In the future, there is planned to be an active reserve in Te Tumu, but the early conversations around that is that it may be a lease rather than something that's council-owned. And there is, of course, uncertainty in terms of Te Tumu, in terms of development timeframes, and the aspirations of the sort of Ngāti Whakaui descendants and the owners of the Te Tumu Kaituna 14 block down there. So whilst it's been addressed in the staff report saying that we don't need to do it at the moment, we need to look at it now because there is a bit of a process in terms of reclassifying, small amount of consultation required. And Gordon Spratt Reserve, as well as Blake Park, are heavily used in the weekends. So this is about being a little bit, trying to be ahead of the ball, if I can put it that way, with your leave. And investigating the reclassifying of Simpson Reserve, which used to be the active reserve, back to an active reserve. Just a little bit of forward planning.
Very good, thank you. Dawn, you've seconded this, is that? Yes, thank you.
So, yeah, just to reiterate on what Steve has said, I think that we are trying to promote in our communities community wellbeings, health and exercise. They're really strained out in Papamoa, as we are aware the Mount is as well, and I'm sure the other sports fields and the other areas. I think this is quite an easy solution to fix something that probably could have been done a few years ago, and yep, that's just not how it was. So looking forward and into the future, we can see what is happening out there. I think this is such a good initiative, and again, we've had a lot of submitters and a lot of people have come to our cafe talks just regarding this issue. And again, let me just help you by saying it does promote health and exercise and wellbeing in our community.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it here. It's a great location across the road from Papamoa Primary School as well. But I just have a question. I don't know actually what's involved in reclassifying a park from and what that actually triggers and what that means.
Thank you. Could maybe one of the staff.
So there are public consultation processes, and in certain instances there's a approvals required of ministers. We'll bring that all to you when we bring a paper. And just the other point I'd like to make is that, just similar to the previous conversation about community centres and doing that, a review of that and a network plan, the same is happening in terms of the active green space for the LTP. We were looking at our long-term needs, what we have available, what's planned to come on stream, can we get better utilisation from existing spaces, potentially by using some artificial turfs, etc. So that's all going to be part of the LTP, and again we'll cover and give you an overview of all of the projects we're working on as part of the LTP on the 28th in the policy workshop, so that will give you a better picture of all of these work streams that are flowing into that.
Just so in physical sense, does that mean then that you can put lines on it for a rugby field, which you can't now? Or, you know, what does that actually, you can't currently create a, sorry, I just really don't quite, physically what does that do to the park when
you deal with it differently, so you've got different treatments. If something is delivering a purpose predominantly as a neighbourhood reserve and is effectively there for local recreation, generally tends to have playgrounds and those types of things. If it's an active reserve, it is used for active sports, so team sports training or team sports competitive playing, and so it will have markings and it will have equipment. In some instances it has toilets and showers and etc. So they're providing a different purpose within our network. Neighbourhood reserves are provided for the local community. Active reserves are provided across the whole city as a network across the city, and they function together as one network. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christine. Councillor Robson, followed by Councillor Baldock, I think.
Yeah, look, I'm more than happy to support this. I'm minded in sporting terms of the words of Wayne Gretzky, who was probably the greatest ice hockey player ever, and when asked why he was so good, he said he doesn't skate to where the puck is, he skates to where the puck is going to be. And that's really good advice. We are behind things, I think, in the active reserve space. I know there is work being done in that space, but the idea that we are squeezing Blake Park and are looking at spending circa $8 million putting a linear park, which, trust me, you won't be able to play rugby on, or football, or French cricket, or anything else particularly active, is just, to me, nuts. We need to make sure we have provision for active, real green, real parks in the city. And we need to make sure we prioritise those ahead of other things. I'm totally in support of what's happening here.
Very much. Councillor Baldock.
You might be able to skate, though, on that other linear park and see a lot of enjoyment for young people in the city.
An ice rink.
All right, folks, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions, and carried. Thank you very much. And Councillor Morris, thank you very much for introducing those. This brings us, folks, to 10.4.
A couple of things outstanding with this. The resolution that you would move was approve $30,000 into as operational expenditure to explore opportunities for a dump station and work together with the MCA on possible sites. So it means you could identify sites, you could get a resource consent, and then we would be able to then put into the following year's budget actual construction when we know what we're building and where we're building it.
Thank you very much, Christine. Councillor Robson, followed by Councillor Baldock.
The tasks are specific to a proposed piece of capital expenditure. How capitalisable is that cost under the current rules? Because it seems not like it's not an exploratory piece of work. It's not big on consultation. It's literally doing the planning for the installation. The decision's been made.
Normally, pre-planning, it would need to be into the design phase to actually be capitalised. Anything before that would struggle to be capitalised.
But
Mr. Baldock.
Well, didn't I hear resource consenting as part of that? That certainly could be.
Yeah, so and I mean that would be part of the investigation. So whether it sits on public land or private land, and the red tape, I shouldn't call it red tape, the consenting issues around it may differ. So there's a little bit of looking into that as well.
Get a split of cap and ops. I think it's a worthy And to have only 2 dump stations in this whole city with the amount of people travelling through in their self-contained vehicles is too little. But if we can find some way of splitting it into capitalised and not.
Could how much are we talking about? 30k, yeah, that's fine. That would be fine. We could split it.
Splitting it 15 and 15, you mean? I'll be happy to move that.
Happy to move, yeah. Larry can move, I can see.
Yep, I'm happy to move that.
All right, thank you very much, Larry.
And yeah, I think it actually came as a shock to me when I read the submission that there are only 2 dump sites in the city. We've opened up more areas for freedom camping, albeit self-contained, and therefore they have to have somewhere to dump and not in the bushes. So I think we need to provide the infrastructure there. I wonder in the investigation whether we may not see the government, they did at some stages offer some funding for this because it's a nationwide issue. We may be able to look at where we could do that, but at least in this coming year we're starting to make progress on that. So I hope we support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robson.
Yeah, look, speaking to this, and it may come as a surprise to the MCA, the whole freedom camping thing, to me, freedom camping in urban areas is just bonkers. I really don't get it. To me, freedom camping is going exploring the bits that aren't built up and don't have apartments and Airbnbs and motels and all the rest of it. That being said, in the world we're currently in, encouraging New Zealanders to, well, you can't leave the country anymore, but to explore this wonderful country of ours is a great thing. And the increasing number of people doing just that, they require facilities that help that happen. And I think we can do something in that space. I think this is a better spend for us than trying to create freedom camping zones actually within our urban boundary when we have parks and other things that people could effectively go to. I just think this is a good idea. I think it's good from an environmental perspective. I think it's good from encouraging people to enjoy this wonderful country of ours. I think it's good from if people do choose to stop here to unload, so to speak, they may have a coffee in Greerton, or they may have a coffee in the Mount, or they may do something while they're here. They may, in fact, decide to take a detour and go to the Omanawa Falls, which will look wonderful, of course, in a couple of years' time, perhaps by the time we get these dump stations organised. So this is a good idea, but I just want to make the point. Freedom camping in urban environments, don't get it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. This absolutely makes sense within our city because it is a popular destination for New Zealanders. But I'd also make the observation that the people who made the submission and the people that have represented the Motive Caravan Association in this chamber during the policy review are all locals. They're all ratepayers. And so you do actually have local residents and ratepayers who take their motor caravan or other such objects and park up at a freedom camping site around the city to get out of their suburban area and park up near the Papamoa War Memorial. Parking up may not be the correct technical term for the demographic, but that is what they do. And stay overnight or go out on a Sunday and have fish and chips by the beach from a local store. So it's not just a domestic tourism thing, it's a local tourism thing too.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Councillor Hughes.
I'm not kind of one way or another on this, but I did note, and I just wanted to note here, that Bay of Plenty Tourism in their submission had suggested that we would not want to encourage more freedom camping in our city, that we wanted to make the most of our existing campgrounds and support our local motels and Airbnbs to get people to stay in their facilities. But whether or not at this stage, yeah, I'm happy.
Thank you very much. Councillor, I'll put this to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? And abstention? From Councillor Hughes. And carried. Thank you very much.
We now just go back and do, it's on your green sheet under 10.3, it's written B, but it's actually C, note staff comments on submissions relating to other topics, because you've now dealt with any other matters or any additions through the resolutions that you've passed. So this is really just agreeing to all of the other notes that we've put into the submission analysis, which will then be sent to the submitters. So just note that would be a B, change it to C.
And it goes without saying that
Thank
where
you.
you've
Yes,
made
that's-
decisions, we will reflect those decisions in revised wording in those comments.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor. I hear Councillor Arbery, actually. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, abstentions and carried. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we are now on to 10 last page of your green sheet, 10.4. Issues and options around the rating policy, including the UAGC and the general differential. You will see Jeremy has very kindly, we're going back to Jeremy's divisions, the 5 dotted lines. So taking A or B, then C, then D.
Happy to move, Your Worship.
Move what, Councillor Robson?
Happy to move B, C, and D.
Happy to second.
Okay, so can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Arbery. Thank you. Would you like to speak to this now?
Yeah, I have to pause quickly for questions. People need them, but I just think we need to get something up and operating. I mean, this is effectively what we've consulted on. We are in a difficult situation. I recognise that. There are arguments for and against the options. On balance, given our history, given our need, and going forward, I think this was one part of our draft annual plan version 2 that I supported strongly. I think this is the right choice for this city.
Thank you. Councillor Arbery.
Can I reserve?
Of course you can. Councillor Bulldog.
Yeah, I won't support this. I was a hairbreadth away from moving B, C and D. Look, we consulted extensively on this in the LTP in 2018.
Sorry, just a point of order. That's what has been moved, B, C and D.
Sorry, I was going to move A, C and D, sorry. We consulted extensively on this in the LTP, and we were converging both the introduction of differentials and the reduction in the UAGC. We agreed at the final draft here to go down to 10 because we were trying to alleviate the burden on the lower income, lower valued properties, which we assume would be the people perhaps in more difficult circumstances to pay rate increases. But the perverse effect of that is, of course, you are sheeting a lot more home to the commercial ratepayers. And having gone through the process of consultation, which we have in front of us, you can basically see most people either don't understand it or they don't really care to comment. You've got, the amount left blank, and the ones who were unclear are by far the great majority. And I don't think it's possible in a rushed process that we went through to actually get this message out across and what the impact is. What we did hear from mostly in the submissions was commercial ratepayers saying, you're really hitting us a bit hard here. We accept the differential, we accept the progression in the UAGC, but whacking it to 10% drop in this 1 year is really going to impact us. And I believe, as I've reflected on it, that the right thing to do is to flatten it a little by just sticking with what we consulted on in the LTP and bring it to 15. And when you look at the charts, it still achieves, I believe, what we were trying to achieve, but it does offer some relief to the commercial sector and some of those who also made submissions in the residential sector that said, well, I might have a high value property, but doesn't mean I've got lots of cash to pay those rates. And if you look at the way it plays out in the charts, it won't be the charts affected by what we're looking at on the whiteboard, but on the 4.7, we were giving, with this 10%, UAGC, we were giving actually a reduction in rates to many people, and I can't see any validity for that. We wanted to try and get as close to zero for some of those at the lower end, and then it brings down the upper end to a much more reasonable rate increase for this period during COVID.
Councillor Bullock. Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, I'm strongly in support of reducing the UAGC from 20% to 10%. And I think the two submissions, or the one submission that really brought it home for me was from Accessible Properties, finding out that they're our largest ratepayer for the city. So they're paying just over $2 million per year in rates compared to the ports, which I believe was close to $1.5 million, something in that order. And when you compare the income streams and the asset values of those two organisations, Accessible Properties has much lower asset value, much lower income levels compared to the port. And I would also note that our decision to reduce the UAGC on the port had no impact on their share price. And if we look at the lowest end of I suppose, the commercial sector, if we stick with the 15%, then that would mean for your hairdressers, your roast shops, the low-value commercial properties, they'll be taking a bigger hit. So the way we've organised it is those bigger commercial players, they're taking the biggest hit, and I mean using isolated examples like this is difficult because there will be some larger value properties that will get hurt. But overall, I think this is the most fair option, or the least bad option from what I've seen.
Thank you, Councillor Arbery. Councillor Cloud.
Yeah, just very simply, the UAGC moving from 20% to 10% brings us much more in line with other metros around New Zealand. For example, Hamilton is 10%, Auckland 12%, Christchurch 4%, Dunedin and Wellington 0%. So getting to 10%, I think, is a good move in that direction. As far as the commercial differential goes, again, we are well out of whack with other metros. And so 1 to 1.2, I believe, is very much on the low end. If you take into account the fact that you can claim GST on your rates bill and also the company tax or the income tax that relates to your profit, a figure of 1.1 to 1.5 is probably more likely to be in line with the residential rates. So I think, in years to come in the LTP, I think we'll have to look at this again and bump it up. And in all my years of owning businesses, I've never found a problem paying my rates bill. It was a very, very small part of my overall expenses. So as a commercial ratepayer, it's never been a problem for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cloud. Anyone else? Look, from my perspective, I will support this. Timing couldn't be worse. And it is what it is for all of us. We're all in the same boat, bombing around. I know the previous council had resolved to certainly move the commercial differential north, and we are, I believe, the lowest in the country. I think Christchurch was it Dunedin is 3 point something, one of them, I can't recall exactly. Excuse me? Wellington's the highest, is it? Right. At 3.25, right, Wellington, is it? Okay. So yeah, I think there is movement to go on that. But I'm very conscious in the circumstances of COVID-19 that the timing is way out with this, and I just hope that we're able to deliver on the promises that we've made over this last 24-hour period, particularly with the activation of the CBD and other parts of the city with various other initiatives. So I will support this, though. Case Council, I will put it to you. Oh, sorry, John, beg your pardon.
On point. Yeah, I just want to pick up one thing, because right of reply is an opportunity to reply to points made by members who have spoken, so it serves a purpose. Quite often you get people who express a view in here, and Councillor Baldock's just done it, that we agreed because we believed that, right? And I'm inclined to speak in the I more often, because sometimes it's hard to understand, and we certainly don't record in the minutes why we do the things we do. So I just wanted to say that the rationale expressed by Councillor Baldock as a collective rationale, I don't believe reflected or included my position. But I do appreciate the support and the eloquent articulation of a more nuanced assessment of the impact of this by Councillor Arbery. I do appreciate the support of the Mayor in this regard. These things are always hard. Change is always difficult. Anyone who's read The Prince by Machiavelli will tell you that those people who benefit from change, right, are normally reasonably quiet because they don't want to be seen to pushing their own barrow, and those people who are disadvantaged by change, he doesn't write exactly these words, but something along the lines of scream like stuck pigs. And I do think we just need to get the balance right here. The group that are most disadvantaged by this are the people who have tenancies in very large commercial buildings. And I would hope that the owners of those very large commercial buildings, for instance, you know, there's a building on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Cameron Road, I would hope that they are cognizant of the ability to treat their tenants fairly in this post-COVID environment, or certainly post-it sort of in New Zealand slightly environment. Look, I commend this motion. I think we need to do this, and this is part of a journey. This journey hasn't finished. I don't believe this journey is finished. We've got more to do. The LTP, we've got more to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, Council, I'll put this to you. We're voting on B, C and D. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. Moving to 10.5. Big one? Yes, we did. Yeah.
10.5, so if we can go back to some of the parked items on the whiteboard, that's what's remaining, plus if there's any other matters. So if we can maybe just go to the parking fee increase. So you would have received an email that shows what the current fees are and what was proposed in the draft annual plan, given the conversation yesterday around the impact of the price of parking on the CPD. You may or may not wish to reconsider that, but it may be worthwhile to have a deliberative resolution given the other resolution, so it's really clear what your position is. Well, that was entitled, I think, Simple Table of Current and Draft Proposed Parking Fees, sent by me at 9:45. It's probably the easiest one to have a look at. And
ignore mine, they were the complicated tables.
Yeah, Paul did it complicated, I went for simple. So yeah, 9:45, and then it shows you the each area's current fee and the proposed that was consulted on. So it suggests that you pass a resolution either to adopt those or to adopt something else.
I'm happy to move we adopt those.
Do we have a seconder for this? I think it was Councillor Clout's moving. Do we have a seconder? We need more time. Okay, thank you. Seems like an average of around 10% increase across. Is that about right? Thank you, Councillor Hollis. While we're gathering our wits, would you like to talk to this, Councillor Clout?
Yeah, very briefly. Yesterday we made a decision to make on-street parking free for, was it 2 hours? Just checking. Anyway, it was basically significantly reducing our revenue from on-street parking, and in my view we need to counter that with in the parking activity to increase our fees for all-day parking, and I still think by metropolitan standards the cost of daily parking or even 2 or 3 hours parking is reasonably low in Tauranga compared to other large cities. So I think this is very fair. I'm sure that people who want to encourage public transport and cycling and walking will be pleased that we are putting these parking fees up. to make it relatively less attractive to bring your single occupant vehicle into town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollis.
I'm not convinced that it'll stop people bringing their single occupancy vehicle in. We live in a car culture, and it seems it'll take generations before that goes away.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I had Councillor Hughes actually, then Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Arbery.
I feel like the Dive Crescent and Cliff Road, these areas are pretty close to town. I'd like to see some of these ramped up a little higher to offset some of our current costs. That if we're giving 2 hours free parking, then we should look at a higher rate to start transitioning people further away from bringing their cars in, but I don't know what that looks like.
Through the chair, it probably would be something we would address through an LTP. We haven't consulted a higher number, and there hasn't, to my knowledge, been feedback to push to a higher number. So it would be difficult to make that change at this point, but it could be included in a long-term planning conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Councillor Baldock, followed by Councillor Arbery.
Just had a couple of questions. Is this the only... We've already dealt with the resolution yesterday with parking, is that correct?
With the resolution yesterday on free parking for 3 hours, and you parked the parking fees, and then you parked the parking fees, and on the free parking from yesterday, there needs to be a bylaw change. We're seeing if we can give you a report on the bylaw in the possibly policy, but more likely council meeting at the end of this month, and you're going to have to consult on that publicly before you can actually implement it.
Thank you. And just clarifying what was in that yesterday before I make a speech on this. So we're talking about a 2-hour time limit and a 2-hour free period, correct? Is that what's being proposed?
That's right.
Can I just ask this question then? Have we resolved the problem that occurred before with the 3-hour time limit, that once you've parked in one place and paid, if it's free, you see, you find it difficult to know whether they've already parked for 2 hours in the city centre, because before there was a perverse unintended consequence that you couldn't park anywhere then, and some people wanted to be in town for longer than 2 hours and they couldn't. Of course they can go to a car park building, but have we resolved that issue, or are we going to just be seeing that happen more?
It's the 2 hours are free, time limited, so the 3 hours would change to 2, which we suggest would counter the behaviour of just shifting your car once for a free all-day parking.
But since you don't pay, you don't activate the machine, I think.
Can Jeremy answer this, because he did investigate this the last time, and that was before Nick was here, so if you're comfortable with that, Nick. So sure. Jeremy did look into it, and maybe it would be good if he could address this issue.
So yeah, the paper that was circulated last night, which was, I think, was it December 2018, I had a strong hand in writing that one. The problem you're talking about, Councillor Border, is exactly right. When you have free parking, unless you have a way for people to tell you that they're here, we don't know when they've had 2 hours on Grey Street, followed by 2 hours on Elizabeth Street, followed by 2 hours on Devonport Road. And they can therefore, if they're smart, shift cars around the town and not pay all day, but still be in the town all day. At the time, we had conversations about the discs that Councillor Hollis mentioned yesterday. I think that the paper said that they were $300 a pop to install, and I think Hamilton put 1,000 of those in, so there's 300,000 of capex potentially, and it will take a minute or two for that to happen. The last time we used the discs in this town, probably 10 years ago, there was all sorts of reportage about what council was collecting information on and why they needed that, but I'm sure we can comms our way out of that one. There was a talk back in December 2018 about potentially asking people to register their number plate in the machines at the moment, and that way you'd know where they are, but there's a difficult comms message about parking's free, but please tell us you're here. People will probably just walk past the machines going, I don't need to use those, so I'm not going to bother, in which case you haven't got that data. So the data around managing the 2 hours, the other way of managing it is having a lot more enforcement officers up and down the streets recognising number plates, or potentially using the number plate recognition software that we were trialling a little while ago. So there's a meeting this morning looking at how we implement what happened yesterday, and I'm not party to that because I'm here.
Very much, Jeremy. Councillor Hughes.
In Auckland, in the down the Viaduct Harbour, there's a parking place that's 2 hours free, but you have to in order to get your 2 hours free, you have to activate the parking ticket machine. Otherwise, you're charged at the normal rate, which in that respect, and everybody just took that as that's fine. You just you just activate the thing for 2 hours, and then after that, it just automatically starts charging you. Is that?
Again, these are the sort of things that you can potentially do in a single area with a defined in and out. You can put signage up. When you're talking about a number of different streets of different lengths within the CBD, that's a lot of signs, for instance, to make sure the message gets through.
The other thing at a parking site like that, they generally have an in-out boom, so you actually can't leave without putting your card in, whereas if it's on the street, people can come and go. They actually don't need to inject their card in anywhere to actually exit from the car park, so it's a different scenario.
Doesn't matter, that one wasn't, but it actually just triggered a ticket with the parking warden if you didn't, but still.
Comes back to the additional enforcement if you want to do that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'll speak to the motion in front of us now. I'm encouraged that we have to go through a bylaw process, and maybe at that point we can reconsider what I think is an ill-considered decision of yesterday. If we'd had the opportunity to read this full report that was emailed, I think we might have a lot more information in front of us as we tackle what is, a really difficult problem. But speaking to the actual charge increases, I won't support them. I think, given what we decided yesterday, we are really muddying the waters. Any increase in paid parking areas like Dive Crescent Cliff Road are going to incentivise people to try and make the most of the 2 hour free parking in the city that we're looking to implement, and that is not what we want, not what the retailers want. I think we'll see a reaction from the retailers. I'm all in favour of increasing parking charges in the CBD to encourage mode shift, but only when we have a bus service that people can use and rely upon. Otherwise, all we're doing is taking money out of the pockets of people who commute here, and because not everybody has that alternative to bike in or to catch a bus in, and it's a question of when you get it all right and all the bits together, then you can start ramping up parking charges to help to incentivise a change of mode shift. So, I don't support the charges at the moment, and I'll vote accordingly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hollis.
I support the increase in charges. It's pretty modest, going from 210, I think, to 230 for most of the leased parks or something similar. Isn't dramatic. I think the biggest worry that we seem to have about on-street parking is commuters coming in and perhaps working in their basic salary, minimum wage jobs, trying to, get to work. And I don't see any data at all. It's all anecdata and hysteria. If there was proper data about people coming in every 2 hours and moving their vehicles, then I'd feel free. Is that a full survey? How long did the survey go for? Which people were doing it and for what reason? I disagree. I think that it's what we see is knee-jerk stuff from us putting yellow lines in the avenues, preventing people parking for free all around the city so that they can just get to their jobs. Absolutely ludicrous idea, but I support the parking fees.
Very much. I thank Councillor Arbery. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in support of the fees that are outlined. At the risk of picking at the scab, that is the parking issue. My view is we don't have any private operators here, and you have to ask why is that, and I'd suggest that we're subsidising the market so that it's not economic for private operators to come here, so then council has to invest in parking infrastructure that other councils don't need to, which I think is a bad use of ratepayers' money personally. But we're talking about these fees that are in front of us, so actually, the other thing is, if it's only 300 grand for the discs, that doesn't sound like much money. It's less potentially than we're going to spend on this free parking trial, and that would give us good data. So personally, I think we should explore that.
Very much. Anyone else? Councillor Kitty.
Yeah, I would like a wee conversation around this. So we have agreed to new shelters going in, okay, to help people with buses, all of which I'm in favour of. Yet when we're talking about this, we're saying the public transport is not working, which we're well aware of. As far as for parking for 2 hours, you know, I commend anybody that wants to get out of their nice warm building over winter and move their car every 2 hours. Because parking is an issue down here. It is going to be very hard for someone to be working in a place and move their car every 2 hours. I also think it's part of the responsibility of our business owners, which I'm sure will be in full support of what I'm going to say, to educate their staff not to park in the free parking outside their business. Okay, because what we are trying to do is get people into the CBD to support their businesses. I'm sure the business owners will not be happy with their staff parking outside. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Robson, followed by Councillor Morris.
Yeah, look, I think the challenge is that there's two parking markets in a city. One of them is your classic shopping, retail, reasonable turnover, come in, support and the other one is your come in, park for somewhere for 10 hours while you work all day. And we've sort of failed to maintain or understand the need for that separation. My understanding is that at least one organisation has privately built some parking in the city and is leasing it out down behind the ANZ building. I'm also conscious that currently I'm paying personally a private organisation effectively $200 a month to park, and that's under the Kingsview. So, you know, I think there is a business here. I think it's more a matter of volume than pricing at the moment. To build a parking building requires a degree of scale, and you know, obviously the ability to deliver the building, which is not as easy as it seems, it would appear. But I think it's about that separation of those two markets, and I think what we're doing here with the 2 hours free and increasing the all-day cost is starting to get into that space, and I think that's the right space for us to be in. I would absolutely support Councillor Arbery's observation that in the light of the figures we've just been given, 300 a disc, which is very different to the figure I had, we should be exploring that. So I would like, if we have a substantive motion around the fees, is that in addition or as a part B, could staff come back to us with an accurate indication of what the data collection system would cost to install and implement? And obviously Hamilton is only a phone call away, but I would like to see that because we are in a data-free zone here. Again, I'm supporting Councillor Hollis here. Evidence-based decision-making is a kind of cool place to be in my experience. So I would like to move an amendment or a part B that in addition to approving these fees, staff be asked to report on the costs, capital costs and operational costs of a data collection system that will inform decisions around parking.
I'm happy to incorporate that into the original motion if the seconder is. Councillor Hollis, you happy to incorporate that into the motion? Yeah.
My work here is done. For a minute.
Ably. Is there any more discussion? Councillor Morris, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we're talking about the off-street and the parking buildings, but if I could just emphasise again the importance of widely communicating to our community the trial. We had a few years ago free after 3, which was a real challenge for people who suffered from lisp, but that was not something that was advertised widely, and many members of our community had no idea that was in place. So if we could perhaps collaborate with Downtown Tauranga, and they can send some clear messages, they're good at that, and if we can also do it ourselves, and Tauranga City Council, please communicate to our community on behalf of our retailers and central businesses that it's just so important that they know. Yeah, we want to make a difference here.
you very much. Well said. Councillor Cloud.
Yeah, right reply. Look, there's been some really good points made in this discussion. I appreciate all my colleagues and their viewpoints, and just reiterating again that these dollars and the percentages that we're talking about here are relatively small, so I commend this to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. I'll put it to the vote then. Council, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Can I see a show of hands? And I'm for. Against? 1. Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much.
Move to film Bay of Plenty. So that was.
Thank you.
Outstanding resolution,
We
which is
were
on
trying
page.
to understand the quantum
It
spent
was.
by Tauranga and other cities.
Yep, and if you go to page 7 of your green sheet, was under the economic development heading, D2, so that's still parked. We've sent you the supplementary information on what others are funding of them and what we have as council funded for the last 3 years. So hopefully that's addressed the questions.
You just find it in our actual agenda.
93 to 94 of your
Thank you.
agenda.
I would happily move option 2, providing $75,000 for 1 year only, and then it can be reconsidered in the long-term plan.
Question of clarification. My understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that the vast majority of the focus of Film BOP is in fact in Rotorua. And yet we, Tauranga, pay the lion's share. Is that, can we have some verification of that?
Yeah, I am aware that that's the case. So, in fact, I think that's where they are working with Rotorua to establish a studio. Yeah.
Which is 54,000. I would happily alter my recommendation on that.
All right. Who was the seconder? Were you happy to second the new? Thank you. Councillor Cloud, would you like to talk?
Thank you. In speaking to it, unfortunately, we got a little bit out of kilter with our long-term plan. So the 3 years committed funding finished at the end of June, just a few days ago. Whereas it really should be lined up with an LTP period, 3-year period. I firmly believe that Film Bay Plenty are on the track to deliver some significant positive results in the wider Bay of Plenty, and some of that will spill over to Tauranga. They actually are very good, I find, at reporting on their KPIs, and there's a very regular quarterly email that gets sent to all stakeholders and all funders, including Tauranga City Council. They're very big on training and upskilling workers within the film and movie industry. They are very big on connections and networking. And also they are seeking to attract local and international productions to our region. And so I believe that we need to keep them going for another year, and then to review our ongoing support of them through the LTP. I note that Bay of Plenty Regional Council did support them for their first year, but then they have stopped. So I'd like to have a discussion with the Regional Council on that as well into the LTP discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baldock will reserve. Councillor Arbery, followed by Councillor Hughes. Thank you.
I'll be voting against this. I think it's too much to give to Film BOP. I think this is, I suppose, a benefit for a small group of people for a specific industry, and I just wonder whether we're the right funding source, or whether that's not better to come from central government as part of their national film strategy, as opposed to Tauranga City Council funding this. So Yeah, personally, I don't think this is a good use of ratepayers' money. And if I look at the service that they're providing, they're largely looking to connect people who are wanting to shoot a film with, for assistance, they help with anything from film location scouting and facilitation to film crew and service provision, advocacy and liaison with local government. So I'm not sure that's a good use of our money.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I won't be supporting this either. I think we're in a very tight situation with this impacts on our rates, and at this time, there's a lot of incredible projects that we've fought hard to get into our annual plan this year that support quite desperate needs at this time, and I think that this one, as Jaco suggested, could find funding in other channels rather than our council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
I also don't support the resolution on the table. One of the original goals when Film Bay of Plenty came in to us in 2017, we agreed on 3 years of funding was to establish a film office, and of course, that is now looking like it's Rotorua. So I think our work here in Tauranga is more or less done. I think it's time for Rotorua to then pick up the baton. I don't think it's something that Tauranga ratepayers should be funding to that level. Yes, they have done very good reporting to us, and maybe it was a bit optimistic at the time, but we haven't sort of had those $40 to $60 million, per season US, TV series or big budget $100 million plus US film series filmed here. And whilst that was not the promise, it was not a promise explicit. That was certainly part of what got some members very excited about it 3 years ago as an incentive to invest. But I think we've done our part for the region by investing $75,000 over 3 years. It's now time for our regional partners to pick up the tab, particularly if film office is going to be based in Rotorua.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I can't support this. There is an irony around people sort of being concerned about the impact of increasing equity in our funding, imposing a burden on commercial ratepayers, and opposing improving the equity of our income system, and yet being prepared to hit those people with a bill of this magnitude for no obvious benefit. I fail to see how the small and medium enterprises in this city are going to benefit from this spend. Look, I admire people who are bold and have aspiration, but that admiration is particularly reserved to when they're bold and aspire on their own coin. It somewhat falls away significantly when their aspirations are done on someone else's coin, particularly those people who may be less well off than themselves. I just can't see this making any sense. If it made real sense from an ED perspective, I would have assumed that P1 would have subsumed it in the work that they're currently doing. The fact that it sits outside P1, and they, I believe, cast a very wide net anyway, too wide. I just can't see that this has any support from our ED experts. It has no support from me.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, councillors? I will put this to you. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Bordock. Thank you.
It's true there's not a promise 3 years ago when we helped them get started, and they have delivered on what they were attempting to do. They've made progress in this. 3 years is not a long time to attract those multi-million-dollar film things to the city. We're talking about establishing an industry here. We know Auckland is oversubscribed. We know other locations in the city can't cope with the demand. Of course, it's been impacted in the last 6 months with COVID and will be impacted for a bit of time. but we need to keep this project going. And committing support the same as Rotorua is a reasonable thing to do. We seem to have this attitude that because the studio might be built in Rotorua that somehow we're going to miss out. It takes 40 minutes for me to drive from my place to Rotorua, and people involved in the film industry will come here, go back and forth, they will spend money in this region, they will get products from here, they will enlist from businesses, and although it may not happen overnight, the idea of a motion capture soundstage, which would be the only one in the country, could be located here, and probably in the most logical place would be in our Tauriko business estate where there is land available, is an exciting prospect. So I think it's very short-sighted to pull the support. I think 1 year of funding and then readdress it in the LTP was a good solution. Priority 1 do support them. They have seen the value. I noticed one submitter making a rather unfair comment about just paying for someone to fly over to Los Angeles often, which is very, very, unfair. Obviously, travel is involved in setting these things up. I've seen them operating here on the steps of Bay Court, training young kids with filming and stuff, and I think they've done a lot of good work, and I see no problem. We've supported many, many things through the last couple of days. I think this is of no less value and no less future potential for Tauranga City, but also for the Western Bay of Plenty to benefit. Every movie made here carries big dividends with the exposure that our region gets for tourism ultimately when it recovers.
Thank you very much, Larry. Councillor, I'll put this to you. All those in favour?
Just by reply.
Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Border. I think you spoke very well on that topic. I have to say that Anton Steele and his crew, as it were, they do a very good job, I believe, in supporting and encouraging the film industry in the Western Bay of Plenty, particularly. Just about every other region around New Zealand does have a active film office, and which is supported by central government as well. And so, I think this is a part of our contribution in a joint sense with other Western Bay of Plenty territorial authorities. Yes, Priority 1 has in the past supported Film Bay of Plenty, and I believe that they would still support the idea of what Film BOP are trying to achieve. And there will always be flow-on effects to Tauranga, even if the actual studio is based in Rotorua. So I do commend this to my colleagues. It is only for 1 year and will allow us more time then to look at the longer term plan implications.
Thank you very much. Councillor, I'll put this to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Can I see a show of hands? And against? The motion is not carried. Thank you very much. Is there Deputy Mayor Salisbury had a alternative resolution, did you not? That was that. Is there any other resolutions that Councillor Arbery?
Can you just clarify how that vote went?
8-3. Mr. Granger is withdrawn for a period of time.
Yeah, I'm happy to move option 3.
I think Councillor Arbery has an option. What was it?
Option 3.
Option 3, for those that aren't aware, is provide no new funding to Film BOP.
So speaking to it very briefly, we had a submission yesterday where we encouraged healthy tension for Omanawa Falls to apply for funding, and I think we should be doing the same with Film BOP. And if we're supporting organisations like this, there's any number of industries that we could set up something similar for, and I don't think council needs to get involved in what I see as being a private market enterprise unless the national government wants to develop a film strategy, in which case they can do that at a national level and provide funding there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, and also speaking to it,
perhaps in response covertly to some of the commentary before. Our neighbours in Rotorua have done very well out of government recently in terms of waterfront projects, historical projects, Regional Infrastructure Fund, Tourism Infrastructure Fund, COVID Fund. And so I think that we've actually contributed quite a lot to the region as Tauranga City, and I think that given there's perhaps not as much contributed by central government as what is required or is fair for Tauranga, I think that it's appropriate that Rotorua does pick this up, as their contribution to the region.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? I'll put this to the vote. This is option 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Can I just see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And against? 2. One. Yeah, I'm against actually this one. Lunch. And then what's after lunch?
Yeah, so there are about 6 or 7 items that are still to be decided upon by council, and what we'll do is we'll just put those in a format so that when you come back after lunch you can work your way through those. Before you break though, are there any other issues other than the 70,000 museum, the Elizabeth Street, the Visitor Information Centre, New York, yeah, yeah, yes, the fireworks on New Year's Eve, the economic development issue, what we do with the surplus, and then the funding application resource conversation that we wanted to have. So they're the outstanding issues. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss this afternoon? Yes.
I'd like to put the personnel expense line in the draft AP in the mix, please. And I appreciate the opportunity to give a heads up for that.
So is there any information that we need to gather through the lunchtime to be able to...
From where I'm sitting, no, I don't anticipate requiring additional information, but I don't know where that discussion may go.
From Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit more information in terms of what the organisation needs for the caring communities applications. Oh, it's on there.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I just don't, the Umanu Bowling Club, and I'm not sure whether that could be raised today.
Yep, we can have a look at that and understand what the issues are and create a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. In response to your question, Christine, about what further information on that particular point about the employee expense line, I'd like to just have at the ready the rates impact of in terms of reducing the costs of staff. What is like a ratio is what I'm saying. So for every $100,000 of reduced staff costs, what does that do to the percentage of the rates? Just if we can have that in a general...
It's a very hard thing to do because the funding is different for each particular area. So it would really depend on where any reduction was made. Like, for example, if it came from the parking activity, there would be no impact. If it came from transport, it would be all of that.
Do we have a general, like a rough percentage, like a weighted average perhaps?
0.7. Yeah, 0.7 per anything per dollar. So if you take $100 out, it's 0.7 as rates. But it's a very. I would not suggest to do that. What I would suggest is what we might do is print out a copy of the revenue and financing list, so you've actually got that in. If you want to look at it that way, because it will give you the funding sources for each of the activities.
And another line I have, and it's a small item, and I haven't given some thought to whether it's needs 75% to bring it back. But P1 funding, I'm conscious there was an offer in the original proposal of a reduction of 75. was sort of got lost in the one. Does that sit in, the ED thing was the big thing? Are you happy it sits inside there? Thank you.
All right, folks, it's 1:45.
Half one, thank you.